launch of and welcome to the launch of the updated modern slavery map. It's our pleasure to see so many people have signed up and registered and following us here on the launch. And it's our true pleasure to also present you the outcome of a joint initiative that has been going on now for several years between civil society, UN agencies, and with contributions from the private sector. My name is Livia Wagner. I work for the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. And I'm very excited to present you a project that we have been working here with my colleagues from BSR GBCAT, but also with other organizations, as I said, throughout the past years, coming from a range of UN agencies and also with contributions from the private sector. So corporate collaboration always remains a challenge to many anti-trafficking actors. And at the same time, it's a dear needed partnership with the business sector. And it's also time to acknowledge that the business industry, or like private sector industry, is at least as important as the other stakeholders in the fight against organized crime. So today we're going to hear about two successful examples of such a corporate partnership between anti-trafficking actors, but also the private sector. And yes, if we could start at the beginning from the presentation. So you can see when you go to the next slide, please, to the agenda. We're going to hear two examples, as I was saying. One is looking at technology and the potential to unlock new powers to address human trafficking in innovative ways when we're talking about, for instance, artificial intelligence. And in a second example, we're going to look at the role of the hospitality industry in addressing child exploitation. But and then we're also going to I'm going to show you now, just after that slide, I'm going to show you the interactive map. We're going to have a presentation of these two examples, and then we're going to have a Q&A session. So please, I encourage you to send us any questions you may have via the chat function, and we will address all these questions then after that, after the two presentations in the Q&A session. So before, I would like to introduce you, as I said, to our modern slavery map, which could actually act as an incubator for such corporate collaborations by mapping the existing organizations. And we started that modern slavery map when we realized that there are so many organizations working with the private sector, specifically addressing human trafficking, but at the same time, other peer organizations from the anti-trafficking community are not fully aware exactly of the areas that they're working on, like the issues they're working on, or the regions they're working in. And also at the same time that the private sector sometimes was not fully aware of the organizations that work with, for instance, issues on due diligence, which is very important for the private sector and is also crucial for their work when they have, for instance, decided to address the issue of human trafficking. So therefore, as you can see, the listed number of organizations on the bottom. So it was at the beginning, it was GBCAT, it was ILO, it was IOM, the UN Global Compact, and ourselves, the Global Initiative, and in consultation also with the Alliance 8.7, that we created this interactive map. And at the moment, we have now 207 entities around the world. And we also, in a second stage, we partnered with the ILO's Global Business Network Against Forced Labor to look at child trafficking organizations specifically, and to include resources and to include all the entities that are working on child labor. And now, and that's why we are very happy that we can present you this updated map with the support of the Laudes Foundation, formerly also known as the C&A Foundation. This interactive map has been updated, and we have new features here And we expanded it and included in total now 207 entities around the world, and that focus, and this is also a new feature, focusing also on empowerment and employment of survivors of human trafficking, which we find is very useful also to the private sector. So now I'm going to share my screen. And here you can see this, you can see my screen, right? I hope so. Yes, I see some people nodding. So here you can see, when you go to modernslaverymap.org, you can see, as I was saying before, you can see the landing page for the modern slavery map. Basically, it's a very easy map to use, but we have also done a tutorial in case you want to see all the different features. So basically, this map is showing you all the organizations, but they are grouped by, as you can see here, geography, by the type of the organization, by the issue that they are working on, for instance, child labor or recruitment, the industry, and now, which is a new feature, is when you look at services provided. That means, and this is also done in, we have put ourselves in the shoes of a business entity and seeing what is important for them, what could be useful for them. So we have also grouped this by the services provided through prevention, identification and remediation, and survivor empowerment. So that means at the same time that you click on it, it's also selected. But I'm just quickly going back. So you can choose here, for instance, the industry, and then automatically here you see different bubbles, the geographical focus, the type, the issue, and the services provided. So for instance, I want to have apparel, just to give an example, in Asia, and that focuses on forced labor. And then immediately on right-hand side, you can see all the organizations, all the entities that are working on that. And when clicking on them, you can see immediately, you can see an overview or an introduction about that organization with further information about where they're based and so on. And what we have also now added as new features is you can click here on See All, where you can see all the organizations. You can, at the same time, you can download the data here on right hand side. And when you want to go to the menu here, you can also see, go back to the resources and download the map data. At the same time, we are doing, because we're constantly updating this map, we're doing biannual review cycles. And we're reaching out either to the organizations that we already know, but sometimes also organizations are writing to us that they want to be included. So it's also possible, if you go to submit an entity, that somebody says, I would like to become part of this interactive map, they can directly fill in here the form and they are part of this, or they're included in the review. So there are many new features, and I would like to give more time to our speakers. But as I said, we are having here a great resource of organizations, and I invite you to play around with the map, which is very useful. We have received the feedback from private sector entities saying that they would have loved to see that map before, when they were also looking for organizations. So please let us know if there are some that you think that should be part of. So just have a look and reach out to us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I think we can go back to our presentation. So as I said, I think this map is a way to show how corporate collaboration can start. And at the same time, there are, what we're going to present now, there are lessons from successful corporate partnerships. So We are very thrilled to have here today 2 examples, as I was saying. That means we're going to hear from 4 experts about their corporate collaboration and from different angles. And I'm very excited to present to you the first 2 presenters, which are, when you go to the next slide, please. So the next presenters, we're going to start the first example with Neil and with John. Neil is the CEO of the Traffic Analysis Hub, and he has been working with Stop the Traffic. Many of you know Stop the Traffic since 2008, and his knowledge in organized crime and human trafficking is extensive. So he has strong history in law enforcement and is a specialist in intelligence collection. In 2019, Neil moved to lead Traffic Analysis Hub, a new standalone cross-sector initiative developed with IBM and Clifford Chance to bring diverse data sets together for tailored analysis for every actor in every sector to identify their vulnerabilities to human trafficking. I'm very excited, Neil, to have you here. Along with Neil, we're also going to hear from John, who is a senior manager, consultant, and solution architects at IBM Cloud and Cognitive Software. So John is leading the IBM Center of Excellence for Corporate Social Responsibility, and he's specializing in the use of artificial intelligence technology for social impact. So based in the IBM Ireland Software Lab, John was previously the worldwide practice leader for IBM Security and Smartest Cities related project delivery. In that role, he delivered global security projects for national agencies, including projects in the Philippines, such as the Public Safety Security Command Center in Davao and the Disaster Operations Center for the Department of Justice and Technology of the Philippine government in Manila. Prior to joining IBM, he was the Enterprise Program Director for Portal for TransAlta in Canada. So we are very excited to have Neil and John here to discuss how to use artificial intelligence to disrupt human trafficking networks. But at the same time, or after that, we're going to also hear from Lauren and from Nicole about their experience in working with the hospitality industry and to address the issue of child exploitation. So Lauren Ast is Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer and General Counsel of CWT, formerly Carlson Wagonlit Travel, where she manages the global legal and compliance function. Based in London, she reports to the President and CEO as part of CWT's Global Executive Leadership Team. She's the executive sponsor of the CWT's Government Affairs Task Force, the Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force, and CWT's Responsible Purchasing Committee. Lauren currently serves as chair of the board of directors of the World Childhood Foundation, and she also serves as a member of the ECBAT International Independent Expert Group and the Interpol Human Trafficking Experts Group. We're very pleased to have you here, Lauren, with us, and very excited to hear afterwards your presentation. Along with Nicole, we're also very happy to have you with us. Nicole is the Executive Director of World Childhood Foundation in the USA, and she also serves as the Vice President of the National Coalition to Prevent Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation. She has been appointed to the State of New Jersey's Task Force on Child Abuse and Neglect and chairs the Outreach and Engagement Committee. Nicole is the former Associate Director of Court-appointed Special Advocates of Morris and Sussex counties, where she implemented and managed community outreach and the Fostering Futures program that provided life skills, HIV and STI screenings for teens in foster care that will age out of the child welfare system. Prior to CSA, Epps led also the US Office of Anti-Trafficking Organization, APNA-AP, and worked as New York-based victim service organization Safe Horizon. So as you can see, all the 4 presenters have extensive expertise, not only on human trafficking, but also on how to deal with private sector. And we are very pleased to hear the 2 presentations now. We would start as I said, with the first example, which is using artificial intelligence to disrupt human trafficking networks. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the two speakers, Neil and John, and to discuss, as I said, how to use artificial intelligence. But before we dive into the questions, I would also ask you if you could briefly present your organization and the two of you, and then we can already start our the questions afterwards. So thank you very much, Neil and John, for taking the time to present today. And the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Olivia. So Neil Giles here, and I'll lead off with a gentle story of our beginnings, and then John will take over and talk a little bit more about the technical aspects of the platform and how it's applicable. So Traffic Analysis Hub is now an independent charity registered in the United Kingdom, and its job is to provide the richest possible picture of trafficking in a highly accessible way to every actor: business, financial, law enforcement, not-for-profit, academic, policymaker, anywhere in the world, at the touch of a few buttons. And it's the result of, frankly, a 10-year journey. So this has been baking in the oven for 10 years, and you have to be very patient, and you have to kiss a lot of frogs, as they say, before you meet a prince. And I know John will be uncomfortable with me describing him as my prince, but to a degree he is. We were very fortunate to meet John in 2017 after almost a 7-year journey to find a partner who was prepared to take a risk and begin to look differently at how we might make a rich repository of trafficking information available to people who could really begin to change the environment in which trafficking thrives. And so with that knowledge that trafficking is a business in its own right, an errant economy that's intertwined with our legitimate, and in which, sadly, it's really hard to stand apart from. We're all complicit in some way, despite our wish not to be. Corporate social responsibility, which tends to be the genesis for many of these projects from big business, is an uneasy bedfellow with a concept as large as this. And so all credit to some key individuals within the IBM corporate social responsibility infrastructure and some of their very senior managers who actually decided, yes, they would take a risk and do this. They would step outside of tradition in corporate social responsibility activity. And I think it's a flagship for that kind of activity and something that the world can learn from. So in 2017, John McGrath, my co-presenter, arrived in London, sponsored by IBM, to host a 3-day workshop with actors from every sector of the anti-trafficking world, including business and finance, to scope what a platform might need to look like and how it could be built. And he did that work very effectively. And yet after that, we were still looking for support to actually build the thing. And to our great good fortune, about 8 months later, IBM stepped back into that breach. And the result is what you will see here. So I think my overarching view would be to the audience that in this collaborative environment, which is absolutely essential to success, we're not going to win without access to data and without partnerships like this. You need stamina, patience, and great allies, and those relationships will last a long time. So over to you, John, to describe what it does.
Thanks, Neil. So right from day one, what we were trying to achieve here was a secure cloud environment where we could share data related to the topic of human trafficking. And the initial principle was to gather the data from the subject matter experts that lived around the world. So these are people inside of the non-government organizations, the financial institutions, and law enforcement. Bring it all together, make it consistent, and visualize it through this cloud environment. We quickly kind of discovered that while there's a lot of very committed people gathering data sets, there simply isn't enough data about the problem available from that source. So we augmented it with artificial intelligence models, one of which is tasked with sourcing negative news content from the public media, but also from social media. So what you're looking at here is the Traffic Analysis Hub. Once you log in as an authorized user, you get a geospatial or a map analysis. And what we're visualizing right now is a period of time. You can see there's a timeline along the bottom of the screen. There's a set of filtering options based on the domain classifications, which again are custom built machine models, which allow us to look at the content of every piece of article that we pick up. And we interrogate that for what kind of trafficking it is expressing, how people are transported, coerced, recruited, and some information about involved parties. For each individual incident, then we will give an intensity heat map and a hotspot, a cluster of hotspots. So you're looking, for instance, at the numbers there signify the number of incident reports that we have in the system for that particular geography. And as you click on each of these circles, they disperse, the map zooms in, and you start to see more information. We're also looking at the intensity hotspot or heat map behind it, and you can overlay multiple visualizations together. The idea is to give an analyst as much flexibility as possible to zero in on the content that they're specifically interested in. And Alice, if we can move to the next slide, please. Now, this is an example of once you've zoomed into something you're particularly interested in, you can click on an individual marker paddle, which is what we've clicked on in the bottom left-hand corner there. And it will pop up some default information. So right now it's popping up the fact that this is a blue marker, which signifies it came from the NGO incident report data set. We've got a number of default classifications in there, and these are all driven by machine learning. And the idea of using machine learning here based on natural language understanding is we're trying to get a consistent classification. So regardless of where we pick the data up from, and it can have many different formats where we gather it from, we're trying to get a consistent classification. So you can see that there's a trafficking type, there's a location type, there's a trafficking subtype, which maps to industry sector. And every one of those labels on the left-hand side, it's possible to filter the data in the map filtering area by those labels. Okay, if we move to the next one, Alice, please. Now, this is an example of route maps. So one of the things that we were trying to do with the content as well was identify reference to locations. Now, naturally, if we're going to put a paddle on a map, we need to know where we're putting the paddle. So we look for locations, but we also look for the context of locations. So when a location is mentioned, is it mentioned as a source of trafficking, a transit point, just a reference to a location? Is it a place where somebody was arrested? And by gathering this information together, we're able to give these route maps. And again, the route maps are influenced by the time period selected and the filter property selected. So in this case here, we're looking at 2 of the 7 data sources that are available. We're looking at a trafficking type of sexual exploitation. We're looking at enrichments related to females as victim genders. So with that information, these are the route maps that are available. You can click on a red dot, which is a source, or you can click on a blue dot, which is a destination. And clicking on either the source or destination shows you the connection points. Now, we've also added a feature called top routes. So this is telling you what are the most commonly used routes for the selection of data that you've selected. So the idea here is to show the corridors that are involved in typical trafficking based on time period, sometimes based on geography, very often based on type of trafficking or type of victim and other parameters. Okay, Alice, we go to the next one, please. Now, once you've identified a hotspot that you're particularly interested in, you can zoom into a low level within the map. As you zoom a little bit closer, you get to add more and more features to the map to give you kind of a geospatial context within which this is occurring. So here you're looking at a cluster of events, and around that, we're able to turn on where are the nearest motels, where are the location of the nearest financial institutions, show me some information about beauty shops, massage parlors, and we're recording information in the system relating to some of the data for individual business entities. Now, we have the ability to go to a greater level of detail. We can do a thing called entity extraction, and that starts to tell us more information about the names of businesses and sometimes even references to individuals. But because of legal restrictions, we can't put that information into the cloud environment for people to access. So the only information you ever see in the cloud environment here will be that non-specific high-level information, the macro view. But using this, you're able to create a picture like this. The analyst could create a report or an analysis from here, and that takes them into the analysis register, which is a collaboration area. The analyst can also do a news explorer, and the news explorer allows you to navigate through a large data set, in this case, the negative news, based on concept navigation. So we tag every concept for every article. We then link them in a network graph using those concepts, those entities, and allow an analyst to navigate through that data using that model. So these are just some of the features. It's very difficult. It usually takes me nearly an hour to do a demonstration of the system now. So it's kind of difficult to cover everything in a short period of time. But I think, unless I'm mistaken, Alice, maybe there's one more slide. Ah, there is. So this just gives you an example. If you look at a particular paddle that has been generated using the machine learning. So this is the TAH classified data. When you click on that and you show the details of it, it starts to give you more information related to the entities that we've extracted. Now, this is a very small example here, but it shows, for instance, locations, additional locations related to this incident. It shows additional information related to the traffickers and the victim information. And we can also start to get into the entities such as reference to hotels and motels, etc. So that's an example of some of the information that's available in the hub and some of the capabilities. And that's everything from my side, I think.
Thank you very much, Neil and John. This was a very, I know you had very little time, and we are very also much encouraging all the audience to reach out to you in case they have more questions, or to reach out to the website, TA Hub. And what we are also now interested, because we're talking about corporate partnership and challenges for such partnerships, is in your case to look at like success stories and examples, like how did your partnership evolve? Where did it start? And also what were some success stories that came out of that collaboration? Yeah, I'll just ask now for these two questions, and then perhaps we have time for the third question.
So perhaps if I start, thanks, Livia. It started in baby steps, I suppose, is the right way. No big commitment, short interactions, really defined small projects, essentially. And then to begin with, this was a relationship between IBM CSR and Stop the Traffic. It helped fund a smartphone app for collection of stories of trafficking from around the globe, and similar data projects, including providing cloud storage and analytical tools. Defined projects were the beginning. You have to build a relationship, you have to build trust, and a big corporate wants to see that you have integrity, I think, and that that their reputation actually will remain intact as a result of the work that they do, rather than in some way be dented by it. So I think you have to show that you have the right kind of governance and practice in place, and the right kind of transparency. It's really important to build a strong foundation.
And then just from I'll give you kind of a different tangent from the IBM perspective here. So we were looking to obviously increase employee engagement in issues like this. And the Traffic Analysis Hub initiative has been hugely beneficial within IBM, but also reaching outside of IBM to foster partnerships and relationships. It also it's a success story in and of itself from an IBM perspective, because the corporate social responsibility approach in IBM around this particular initiative was what we refer to as co-investment. And the idea was to establish a self-sustaining entity that was capable of staying the course over the longer term. And as well as the technology, which is easy to demonstrate, from an IBM perspective, we've invested quite a bit of time and effort into the communications and the sustainment model for how the organization will run for this year, next year, and into the future. So that's been another huge success story from our side, along with some of the great partnerships we've achieved with financial institutions, academia and research organizations, our non-government partners, etc.
Thanks very much. And also what we have heard very often from peer organization is that sometimes the first step, and Neil, as you were saying very rightly, is to build that trust. But sometimes it's very difficult to approach companies because companies, they receive so many requests from different, not just organizations, but working on different issues and so on. What would also be your advice in general, but also particularly when it's starting a collaboration on anti-trafficking activities? What would be your advice for companies and for NGOs in particular, how to start such a partner or collaborative engagement?
That's a really tough question.
Mm-hmm.
I think from the NGO perspective, the answer is keep developing the idea and be professional about what you're looking to achieve from the program of activity. You need to have deliverables that a large business can understand its investment in. So I think all those things are important, and you need to constantly have hope. You know, before IBM came to the development rescue of the program, we certainly pitched to global technology companies who were interested in the concept, but just felt that we, as a not-for-profit, weren't capable of delivering it, weren't capable of bringing it through, and that was their concern. You know, that a not-for-profit budget line isn't multi-millions of pounds. It's or dollars or euros. It's a very different equation to that, and I think that was a risk that those organisations that we approached in the interim felt that the program was therefore undeliverable. It just wouldn't fly, and actually that IBM knew us for long enough and had developed more than a modicum of trust, I think, was what carried them over the line. You know, there are some real heroes in this from an IBM perspective, particularly at very senior level.
I think the other important factor here was the posture of this initiative from day one was open and inclusive. So it wasn't a case of we were investing with just one entity. We always felt like we were establishing something new, which was going to be a community. And it has grown into a community of over 65 organizations at this point, and it's still growing. The fact that it's multi-sector, it's multiple organizations, all of that meant that we weren't sort of just dealing with one NGO or one small organization.
Thanks very much. And yeah, I think we could go for hours and hours to continue discussing this. But again, I encourage you to not just send questions through the chat function, but also to reach out to us or to Neil directly, or to John if you have any questions, or visit the website. We're going to put all the links here in the chat function. So now it's also my pleasure to hand over to my colleague Shuba, who is going to moderate the second panel, or the second example that we're going to present to you.
Thanks, Livia. Hi, everyone. My name is Shiba Chandra. I'm a manager at BSR, and I also manage the Global Business Coalition Against Human Trafficking, or GBCAT. This is a business-led initiative that's housed within BSR that focuses on addressing human trafficking global supply chains and supporting survivors of human trafficking. I'm delighted to be speaking with Lauren and Nicole today to hear about the work that they're doing in terms of countering child exploitation in the hospitality industry. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to them to share a little bit about the work that they do, and then we'll just dive into one or two of these questions before a Q&A section.
Great, thanks, Shubha. It's Lauren. I think I'll start. Thanks so much for. Thank you to GBCAT and GI-TOC for hosting this webinar and all the other collaborators. And Neil and John, incredible collaboration shown with what you've done. So thank you. It's wonderful to see that collaboration. So wanted to just give a brief intro, and I'm joined by Nicole Epps today. So I'll give a quick intro about CWT, and then Nicole will speak a bit about childhood, and we'll talk about the collaboration between our organizations. So for those who don't know us, CWT is a global B2B travel management company. We specialize in business travel and meetings and events. We provide services to corporate clients, not-for-profit organizations, government agencies around the globe, and we have a broad footprint. So nearly 150 countries we're represented in across all regions. Our parent company, Carlson, has committed to the fight against human trafficking 20 years ago. With Marilyn Carlson Nelson, who signed the ECPAT Code of Conduct as the first North American company representing Carlson. And Carlson is also the founding member of the World Childhood Foundation, which was founded with Her Majesty Queen Sylvia of Sweden with the mission of fighting sexual abuse against children and exploitation. And that includes fighting human trafficking. So Nicole, pleasure to be here with you today. Nicole has been with Childhood USA for 5 years and just this month took over the executive director role. So we're delighted, and she and I are in close contact on board matters, ICE board chair. So Nicole, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you to GBCAT and supporters today and everyone listening. For 22 years, the World Childhood Foundation, founded by Her Majesty Queen Sylvia of Sweden, has had a mission to inspire, promote, and support solutions to end child sexual abuse and exploitation. The end of child exploitation, particularly in human trafficking, is our highest priority. And in the United States, we have been able, through our work as a partner with Lauren and Carlson for many, many years and their support, been able to expand the reach of our work to serve directly and indirectly over 90,000 children and families throughout the United States. So we're excited to share our work together today.
Great, thank you both. So I'd love to just, now that we know a little bit about your organizations, we learned in the context of putting together this webinar about some of the work that you've done together. If you can share a little bit about, for example, the Out of the Shadows Index that was created jointly, and really how from that specific deliverable you've seen your partnership and your work on anti-trafficking efforts evolve within your organizations.
Sure. And I can maybe kick it off with just a sense of, with CWT, sort of how our partnership with Childhood works. We have been working with Childhood as one of our key priority organizations through our anti-human trafficking task force. So at CWT, we started a special task force focused on human trafficking in 2017. Our head of responsible business, who I believe is on the call, I saw her name. She's actually the umbrella coordinator for it, but actually it involves 15 stakeholders who represent commercial parts of our business around the globe. So our goal is to come up with a list of priorities and partner organizations each year, look at how we're going to support those organizations, and Childhood is an important part of our roadmap. And although we don't have slides today, we are going to talk a bit about the Out of the Shadows Index. I do have a hard copy here, and we're going to put a link to it. It is online. We're going to share that with you so you can have a look at it. But similar to the project that John and Neil spoke about, we worked collaboratively with Childhood, both Carlson at a sponsorship level, helping to fund the index, but then also CWT actually raising awareness about the index. So maybe Nicole, I'll turn it over to you to talk a bit about the index, and then I can share what we did at CWT.
Absolutely. So the Out of the Shadows Index was a partnership with The Economist and the support of Carlson, as Lauren has mentioned, and it measured the response of child sexual abuse and exploitation in over 60 countries, which represents 85% of the world's children. It did not just measure the prevalence of abuse and exploitation, but both the civic, the private, and the public sector response, which we felt was very important. We are working in fields where there is not as much current research, but it's important for us in childhood in our role as a foundation and acting as a liaison between donors and community-based organizations to show the true recommendations and guidelines to help end the scourge of exploitation in our communities, both nationally and globally.
Thanks, Nicole. And I'll say one of the, we were so impressed at a CWT level with the output. Obviously, a lot of detail is in the index. A lot of work went into it, both at childhood and from the team at the Economist Intelligence Unit, who were extraordinary. I think when we saw the report at CWT, the task force's initial thought was, what can we do with this? How can we actually make an impact? What we did was we took the list of countries that was in the index. We mapped against our footprint and looked for opportunities where we could make a difference. And one was Egypt. So we looked closely at the fourth quartile. Egypt was ranked 32 out of 100 when it came to responsiveness for trafficking and for sexual abuse against children. And we said, let's have a look at that. And Roland Bungie, who actually also is on this call, I just saw Roland's name. So thank you for joining, Roland. Roland has been our managing director for Egypt. And we actually highlighted the fact that this is an opportunity for us. And Roland worked very closely with our task force and locally to develop opportunities where we at CWT could raise awareness, both with our clients. I know designed luggage tags. We did awareness raising campaigns with our clients and suppliers. We actually worked with, I saw the UN International Organization for Migration is one of the collaborators for this event. We worked with them on raising awareness through a film festival in 2019. So actually really use the index as a launch pad for us to focus our efforts as a private sector company with influence in a country that could benefit from some change from what we could see from the index. I think you might be on mute, Shubha.
Thanks for that.
Sure.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, and it's also great to hear about how a deliverable is created and then is actually being used by the company. A lot of times you hear about a deliverable being created and then it's kind of put out there and you don't really know what happens. So being able to understand, the work that you're doing with it and how it's been helping to inform the work that CWT is doing is also really helpful. But just also love to hear from Nicole on this about how your work in developing this index has changed the way that you are doing work within your organization as well.
Absolutely. So I think that it's fair to say that many times, regardless of industry, we live in silos. What was really helpful, World Childhood Foundation is one of 4 offices. We have offices in Germany, Brazil, and Sweden, in addition to the United States. So we have, as I shared earlier, both a national and international portfolio. What was helpful with the creation of the Out of the Shadows Index is that it helped to guide the programs that we support throughout the world. The key recommendations are recommendations that we were able to share with our current program partners, and also as we explored new opportunities to reference the recommendations. Are you following some of the guidelines shared in the Out of the Shadows Index in your work? What did we get right? What are we missing? And most importantly, it's a wonderful starting point. We like to share at Childhood that we are all working in the business of keeping children safe from abuse and exploitation. Whether you're working in an NGO or you're in the private sector, we are all parents, friends, aunts, and we want to keep our children safe. So the more tools that we have to provide tangible solutions, it's for the benefit for not only our organizations, but all of the communities with which we serve.
Thanks, Nicole. And so what we heard from both Neil and from John in the last kind of segment was just about how to create, or how, at least in their case, they're able to create this partnership. Would love to hear, and what are kind of the first steps, and really what NGO partners need to be thinking about when they want to approach a company, things like that. We'd love to hear from both of you in terms of your perspectives when it comes to grant making support. What advice do you have for both donors but also recipients? How do you really make the case for why a company, for example, should work on this particular issue?
Well, I'll defer to Lauren as our board chair and grant maker.
Well, I think Nicole might be the resident expert on how to attract donors, but I'm happy to jump in with my thoughts, actually. And I would say to your question too, Shiva, we would have loved to have had the interactive map live and updated when we were doing our index, because I think that really dovetails nice and saves private sector some work when it comes to finding organizations. But I would echo what Neil and John spoke about, and certainly Neil used one of my favorite words, integrity. I think having the relationships and building the integrity and the trust is fundamental. It takes time to do that. I think that can be, in the world we live in, where everything is lightning speed and you place an order and it's at your doorstep before you even knew it was going to arrive. I think it can be a little bit challenging to take the time to develop those relationships, but I do believe that's what it's about looking at NGOs that have a clear strategy and a record for delivering on their promises. I think that's a tremendous asset if an NGO can do that, because it attracts companies to stay with them and provide additional support. How about you, Nicole?
I agree. And I think from the NGO perspective, I think it's very important that there's transparency within relationships with the donors and the NGOs. It's important to be very honest about where you are, what your goals are. I think Neil shared also saying it's great to dream big, but also acknowledging that your bandwidth may not be able to do every project. I think that's the benefit of partnerships, because you get to share the intellectual capital from your work, perhaps on the grassroots and sort of innovative level for childhood, while also learning from our partners such as Carlson and asking questions that we ourselves may not have thought of. And I think the benefit of the interactive map that has been shared is that it will also inform our work going forward. We have an opportunity to look and really identify those areas, those hotspots within our countries that we work. And as we look to expanding the Out of the Shadows Index, potentially in the United States, it gives us a very good framework of identifying where we can be the most influential and bring better support.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's also wonderful to hear about how you both would use interactive map, and loved hearing Lauren in particular about how you thought the interactive map could have been used in the past when you were looking for partners in Egypt. And that was actually something I would like to just flag to the audience, that was something that just came up in our conversation naturally when we were talking about this. So, really, that's something that we love to hear. When you look at the interactive map, it's not going to be the end all, and it's not going to connect. It's really the first step to be able to introduce you to the partners. But it's then up to you to determine who do you want to approach, and also to be able to forge that relationship. But one thing that we had found when we were doing a landscape analysis of the space is that there are a lot of organizations that are out there that are doing wonderful work, and a lot of them don't know about each other. And so the goal with this map is to really be able to increase the level of visibility, both within the private sector about the organizations that they can partner with, but also within these entities, these NGOs, foundations, et cetera, that are doing this great work, for them to learn from each other, right? We see a lot of duplication in this space, and we're really focused on collaboration, which is one of the reasons we're excited to be talking to these two sets of partners today. So I'll stop there. I know we have about 7 or 8 minutes left for a Q&A session. I wanted to just maybe first maybe reflect on the conversation that we had with John and Neil. I know there were a couple of questions that came in on the chat as well about the hub as well. And just to say, thanks to everybody that's sending questions, and to Neil and John, looks like they've been answering all the questions on there. We're happy to send you our email addresses after, and we can forward on your questions to the panelists after today's call. Maybe, yeah, let's just see what has come in. I know one of the questions was about merging of, was about the quality of the entities that are listed on the interactive map, which I can answer on behalf of the partners, which is just to say that when we had developed this map, the point was to, to be able to introduce these different organizations. We can't vouch for, based on our understanding, they're legitimate organizations. We don't know. We haven't validated it with anybody else. To the extent we're able to reach out to the organization and have them clarify their mission and the work that they do, we've done that. But you should certainly be doing your due diligence on the organizations before you reach out, or certainly before you engage with them more directly. So just wanted to flag that. Let me see what else has come in. And also, I welcome Neil and John, if there are particular questions that you wanted to jump in on or elaborate answers on, you're welcome to do that. And just making my way through this chat right now. So one of the questions that has come in is just around the plans to merge with the other data sets like Polaris or UNODC. That's a good question. So I know that from the Polaris data set, we had seen that a lot of those organizations were kind of serving different functions. So the role of the interactive map is really to be able to find organizations that can do some work with the private sector. So these aren't organizations that are just focused on working with just government. We are looking for that type of connection, and that's really what we think makes this map different from others that are out there. So right now that there is no plan to merge those data sets, but we have talked to Polaris. They're aware of our map, we're aware of theirs, and really hoping to enhance the understanding of all the actors in this field through these resources. Let me see what else.
I could just interject briefly, Shuba.
Yes, please.
Just from Traffic Analysis Hub's perspective is that there's a point down the track where we all kind of need to be headed for some kind of convergence, because that's when we begin to win. I think when we find ways that we can work collaboratively and in a complementary way, a safe way, with other data programs. So that's our philosophy, and I continue to dream that dream.
Great. Maybe what I know there are a couple of questions about COVID-19 that have also come up in here, so just trying to track them down. About impacts. Yeah, it's a good question. So when it comes to COVID-19, one of the questions that has come in around has this changed the way that you look at the data? How does that work? I guess this is a question more for Neil and for John, but also for Lauren and Nicole, just about the work that you're doing. What does this mean? You're shedding, this is a lot of the information that you're going to be relying upon in understanding where child exploitation is taking place, is reliant on sometimes field work and things like that. So how does that look like at this time?
I can probably talk a little bit about the collection of data during COVID-19's outbreak. So we did an analysis of this actually last year, where we took a couple of key dates throughout the world. For instance, the date that the World Health Organization announced the pandemic, the dates when certain countries locked down. Unfortunately, the United States, it didn't happen, so it was difficult to do an actual date for the United States. But we also looked at the first reported cases. And then we took those dates as sort of gate points and looked at volumes of reporting of negative news media especially. And naturally, we saw some decline in the reporting of human trafficking related incidents during the initial part of the COVID pandemic. But gradually over the course of, from May through to August, that returned to normal levels of reporting. And then we had some conversation with our partners around how it impacted certain industries. And we've started to see, for instance, the illicit massage industry, especially in North America, almost no impact at all on that business during the COVID outbreak. So it kind of depends on geography. It also depends on your data source. So a negative news source showed an impact. Some of the data from the review sites of certain industries didn't show any impact.
I would say from childhood's experience, I think that pandemics sort of illuminate the gaps that were already in our society. So what we've seen for much of our work is the data has changed. So the mandatory reporting is less because we have less eyes on our children as teachers and, coaches and doctors. However, we know that there has been an increase in ER visits and the horrific ramifications of why children are going. It also illuminates the importance of measuring data in helplines such as sort of NCMAC and RAIN. They've also seen an increase in youth minor disclosures. And then I'd also like to share that NetClean, which has been a childhood partner for many years, has also released a report on the impact both emotionally, mentally, and statistically in the accessing of child sexual abuse materials throughout the globe as well. Lauren?
I would say the same. And actually, I would draw your attention, if I can get the link, I will. NetClean today, I think, just published a report on the impacts of COVID and in terms of online sexual abuse and children online. So I think that could be an interesting reference tool. I have not yet read it myself because it literally just came out, but I can share the link with everybody. It could be informative.
Excellent. Thank you all. So I know that we're at time now. I just wanted to say that I realized that we didn't put a contact details on this slide, but what we'll do following this call is to just send you an email so you have our contact information, and any additional questions that you have, you can send it over to us. We'll also include some of the links to the information that was shared on this call. And yeah, we encourage you, first want to thank our speakers for participating today, sharing a little bit about the work that they're doing together on this topic. And also, hopefully you can have some time to play around on the interactive map and let us know what you think. Let us know how we can make it better. This is a public resource that we're trying to improve, so we appreciate your support. So with that, I will end it, and thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.